Timothy Burns, known as Tim among his friends, checked his phone after receiving a voicemail from Candace, or Candy as she preferred to be called, his wife of 5 years. Landing a service contract with a large nationwide company in California was a significant achievement for him and his IT firm, likely leading to a substantial salary increase. Tim hoped this financial stability would allow them to finally start the family they had been planning. However, doubts began to creep into Tim's mind following a recent camping trip with his boss, Jake Hudson, just over a week ago. Since returning from the trip, he noticed a subtle change in Candy's behavior. She seemed preoccupied and occasionally snippy with him, prompting Tim to pay closer attention. Upon returning home and sorting laundry, Tim discovered something unsettling in Candy's panties, a dried substance with a distinct odor. It dawned on him that it could be semen, sparking a wave of devastation and suspicion. Determined to uncover the truth, Tim decided to seek legal advice before confronting Candy. Consulting with Ruby Hawkins, a family law attorney recommended by a friend who had gone through a divorce, Tim expressed his concerns about Candy's fidelity and his desire for a divorce if she was indeed unfaithful. Ruby explained the legal aspects of divorce in their state, emphasizing the importance of solid evidence, such as photos or videos, to support allegations of adultery. She offered to hire an investigator to gather evidence discreetly. In terms of asset division, since both Tim and Candy earned similar incomes and they had no children or significant assets, the divorce settlement would likely result in a 50-50 split of their assets without any alimony payments. With Ruby's guidance, Tim decided to proceed with the investigation, preparing to confront Candy with the evidence once it was obtained. "All right," Tim agreed. "Go ahead and proceed with it. I'll be away for about 3 days, so that's likely when she'll do it." He enlisted the help of an investigator named Marvin Johnson, who suggested placing a tracking app on Candy's phone and provided Tim with devices to record phone calls and audio in her purse. Tim felt uneasy about invading her privacy, but he felt compelled to uncover the truth. Suspicion lingered after the camping trip with Jake, who appeared more arrogant and secretive than usual. It seemed as though Jake was hiding something from Tim. As Tim prepared to leave for his trip, Candy drove him to the airport and gave him a kiss goodbye, promising to call him later that evening. The first night Tim was away, he called Candy as planned. He was surprised to learn that she would be working as a waitress for a party at Jake's house, filling in for a sick colleague. Although Tim knew she could use the extra money, something felt off about the situation. The following day, Tim contacted the investigator to inform him of Candy's whereabouts. However, when he tried calling Candy, there was no answer on her cell or the house phone. Concerned, he awaited updates from the investigator. Upon receiving an email from Marvin, Tim's worst fears were confirmed. The attachments contained graphic photos showing Candy engaged in sexual acts with Jake and 2 other colleagues. Overwhelmed with disbelief and despair, Tim struggled to comprehend the betrayal. Desperate for answers, Tim attempted to reach Candy one last time but was met with voicemail and unanswered calls. Consumed by heartbreak, he sought solace in alcohol at the hotel bar. The following morning, Tim checked the tracker and discovered that Candy's phone was still at Jake's house, indicating she was likely still there. Marvin confirmed this with an email containing more disturbing photos of his wife participating in a gangbang with several men, including Jake, his son Mike, and others from Jake's IT firm. These were individuals Tim once trusted as colleagues, but now felt betrayed by. He didn't recognize 3 of the men, assuming they were friends of Mike's. After finalizing his business in California and obtaining the contract, Tim departed for home. Upon arriving, he noticed Candy's car was missing, confirming his suspicions. Despite her lie about being at home, Tim called Ruby's office and was surprised to schedule an appointment for that afternoon. When he called Candy, her response seemed dishonest and he ended the call without expressing affection, leaving her unsettled. Meanwhile, Candy reflected on Tim's unusual call and his absence of affectionate words. Despite her initial intention to return home after the first night, she found herself indulging in the pleasure of being with Jake and Mike, justifying it as something she deserved. She convinced herself it would end once her classes resumed, oblivious to the reality of her actions and the impact on her marriage. When Jake returned home, he found her naked, engaging in sexual activity with Mike on his bed. Joining them, Jake offered her his own arousal, to which she eagerly responded. After their encounter, Jake remarked playfully about sending her husband out more often, suggesting she could indulge in such activities while he was away. She expressed concern about her husband's eventual discovery and affirmed her love for him despite enjoying the encounters. Jake proposed arranging for her husband to be out on weekends so she could continue her rendezvous with them. He made it clear that she was to refrain from intimacy with her husband moving forward, as she now belonged to them. Later that day, Candy entertained Mike's friends and other acquaintances, embracing her newfound role as a party companion. Engaging in various sexual acts, she reveled in the attention and pleasure, feeling liberated in her new identity. Meanwhile, Tim was devastated when presented with evidence of his wife's infidelity, including photos and videos capturing her explicit interactions with multiple men. His perception of her changed, and he struggled to reconcile her actions with the woman he once knew. Ruby attempted to console him, but his trust in his wife and Jake was shattered. Reflecting on the situation, Tim questioned how his wife could change so drastically and why he deserved such betrayal. He also reassessed his relationship with Jake, realizing the true nature of their friendship. "I'll proceed with preparing the divorce papers, citing adultery," Ruby stated. "Additionally, we can file for alienation of affection against Jake and your colleagues. While those lawsuits often don't lead to much, I believe we can negotiate a favorable settlement." "Please proceed," Tim replied. "Just be cautious," Ruby cautioned. "I'd rather not have to deal with any legal issues on top of everything else." "Don't worry," Tim assured her. "I'll be careful. How soon can you have the papers ready?" "I can have everything prepared within a couple of days," Ruby confirmed. "In the meantime, try to maintain normalcy around your wife." "I'm not sure I can pretend everything's fine," Tim admitted. "And I certainly won't be intimate with her again. Who knows what she might have contracted from those men?" "Tell her you're feeling unwell," Ruby suggested. "That should give you some space to sort things out." Tim agreed and left Ruby's office. Sitting in his car, Tim realized he couldn't continue working for Jake or being around the men who had betrayed him. He reached out to John Carlson, an executive at Empire, to inquire about a job opening. "Tim Burns speaking," Tim said when John answered the phone. "Tim, it's good to hear from you," John replied. "How can I help?" "I'm considering a change," Tim explained. "Is the position at Empire still available?" "It certainly is," John confirmed. "Are you ready to join us?" "Yes, I am," Tim affirmed. "Recent events have made me realize I can no longer work where I am." "I'm sorry to hear that," John responded sympathetically. "Let's discuss the details. How about joining us on Monday?" "That works for me," Tim agreed. "Excellent," John said. "Why don't you and your wife join us tonight for dinner? We can catch up and finalize the arrangements." "I appreciate the offer, but I can't bring Candy," Tim said hesitantly. "Oh?" John inquired. "Is everything all right?" "I'd rather discuss it in person tonight," Tim replied. "Sure, Tim," John replied, sounding concerned. "You know, Rose is a licensed counselor. Maybe she can help you if you want." "That actually sounds good, John. I appreciate it," Tim responded. "Good," John confirmed. "I'll call Rose and let her know. Think you can come by at, say, 6:30 tonight?" "Sure," Tim agreed. 6:30 it is. "Thanks again, buddy." "My pleasure," John said. They ended the call, and Tim felt a sense of relief wash over him. He started his car and headed home. Upon arrival, he noticed that Candy still hadn't returned from Jake's house. He grabbed his briefcase and entered the house, proceeding to shower, change clothes, and sit at his computer to write his resignation letter. Candy finally arrived around 5 p.m. and found Tim sitting at his computer. She went to kiss him, but he turned his head, prompting her to kiss his cheek instead. Confused, she asked, "Is everything all right?" "Not really," Tim admitted. "I'm not feeling too well. Maybe it's jet lag or something. I'll sleep on the futon when I get back tonight." "Get back?" Candy inquired. "Where are you going?" I'm meeting someone for dinner, he explained. Are you meeting a woman? She questioned, a hint of concern in her voice. You mean, am I cheating on you? Tim responded. No, I've never cheated on you in all the time we've been together, and I have no intention of doing so now. Can you say the same? His words startled her, and she felt a pang of guilt. Of course I can, she replied unconvincingly. So, how was your trip to California? Tim redirected the conversation. Successful, she replied. And how was your little job at Jake's house? It went well, Tim said flatly. Even when it was hard, it was still fun. I'll bet, he remarked without emotion. I'd better get going, he announced, saving his work and shutting down his computer. He changed into something more formal and left without further interaction. Candy couldn't shake the feeling of unease as she watched him go. Once Tim's car left, Candy picked up the house phone and called Jake, unaware of the recording. Jake, I think he knows something, she confessed. What makes you think that? Jake inquired. He wouldn't touch me at all, she revealed. He usually always gives me a kiss and tells me he loves me, but he didn't. He seemed so cold. And he just left, saying he had a dinner appointment. Oh? Jake inquired. Did he mention who he's meeting? No, he didn't, Candy replied. Jake, what if he knows? What if he's planning to leave me? So what if he does? Jake sneered. You can always come stay with us. And don't worry about Timmy boy. I'll keep him running around so much he'll hardly ever be home. But I don't want to lose him, Candy pleaded. I love him. Jake laughed mockingly. Yeah, you've certainly shown us all how much you love him these past couple of days, haven't you? Jake taunted. That's not funny, Jake, Candy retorted. I know what I did with you guys, and yes, I enjoyed it, but I still love him. I don't want to lose him. Yeah, right, Jake scoffed. Let him get it out of his system. Eventually, he'll come around. And if he doesn't, well, we can handle that too. You're not going to harm him, are you? Candy asked anxiously. Not directly, Jake replied. We'll just need to make him understand how things are going to be from now on. And you'll help make that happen. What? Candy gasped, shocked. That's right, my eager little slut, Jake said. When the time comes, you'll assist us in explaining things to him. Remember who you belong to now. I'm sure you wouldn't want those videos we have of you to surface. You wouldn't dare, Candy protested. Oh, but I would, Jake asserted. I've got footage from the camping trip and plenty of compromising videos. Your fate is in your hands. It's up to you to keep Timmy boy in line. Feeling trapped, Candy reluctantly agreed. Okay, Jake, she conceded. But please, don't harm him. Jake dismissed her concerns. Yeah, whatever, he dismissed, ending the call. Tim arrived at the large two-story home where John and Rose Carlson resided. He brought a bottle of wine as a gift and was greeted by John at the door. John graciously accepted the wine and welcomed Tim inside. Come on in, Tim, John said with a smile. Thanks for the wine. It'll be enjoyed tonight. John escorted Tim to the dining room where Rose was waiting with her lasagna. Tim, meet my wife, Rose, John introduced. Rose, this is Tim Burns, our new account representative. Tim shook Rose's hand as John opened the wine. Pleasure to meet you, Tim, Rose greeted warmly. Likewise, Mrs. Carlson, Tim replied politely. Please, call me Rose, she insisted. Mrs. Carlson sounds too formal. They took their seats at the table, and Rose served up the lasagna while John poured the wine. Tim complimented the meal, expressing how much he enjoyed it. I'm delighted you like it, Rose responded. It's one of my specialties. So, Tim, forgive me for prying, but I'm curious why you left Jake's company so abruptly, John inquired. Did something happen? Tim nodded, preparing to share his story. Yeah, something happened all right, Tim began. Please, Tim, share with us, Rose urged. Tim took a moment to collect his thoughts before recounting the events. That's tough, John sympathized. I've been through something similar, although the circumstances were different. What's your plan now, besides changing jobs? I've consulted a lawyer, and I'm filing for divorce, Tim explained. My lawyer says it'll likely result in an equal division of assets. Have you considered counseling? Rose inquired. It feels too late for that, Tim admitted. I don't understand what happened to Candy. It's like she changed overnight. I never imagined her capable of this. How are you coping with all of this? Rose asked. Not very well, Tim confessed. My lawyer suggests I act normal around Candy, but it's challenging. Right now, I can't even bear to look at her. Maybe counseling could help, Rose suggested. I might consider it, Tim said. Rose is highly regarded in her field, John interjected. I believe she can assist you through this. Plus, it's covered in your benefits package. That's a relief, Tim chuckled. I'm serious, John insisted. Rose was invaluable to me when I needed support. I'm confident she can help you too. He turned to Rose. Can you fit Tim into your schedule? Absolutely, Rose confirmed. I think an hour weekly should suffice. How does that sound, Tim? Tim weighed the offer before agreeing. All right, I'll give it a try, he said. John nodded approvingly. Excellent decision, John praised. I'll ensure you have the necessary time for counseling. Coordinate with Rose and let me know. I will, thank you, Tim expressed gratitude. Now, if you'll excuse us, Tim and I will discuss his new role in my office, John said. Certainly, dear, Rose agreed with a smile. And I'm excited to work with you, Tim. Thank you, Tim replied as he followed John to the office. They spent the next couple of hours discussing Tim's new job. By the end, Tim felt more in control of his life. He bid John farewell and returned home. When Tim arrived home around 10 p.m., he found Candy still awake on the couch. How did your meeting go? She inquired. Quite well, thank you, Tim replied. Now, if you don't mind, I'll retire to bed. Good night. He retreated to the second bedroom where he began to undress. Are you sleeping here tonight? Candy asked from the doorway. Yes, Tim confirmed. I'm still not feeling well, so I'll use the futon. Is that all right? Sure, she replied hesitantly. I was hoping we could spend some time together since you've been away for 3 days. I'm not up for it tonight, Tim stated firmly, feeling uneasy at the thought. Okay, Candy responded softly. Maybe tomorrow? I'm not sure, Tim replied. We'll see. With that, Candy turned away, pondering whether Tim was aware of her recent activities. The next morning, Tim rose early, retrieved his resignation letter, and made a cup of coffee. He spotted Candy's purse on the counter and discreetly retrieved the audio recorder, downloading the previous day's conversation. Without bidding farewell or expressing affection, Tim left the apartment. As the door closed behind him, Candy lay in bed, tears streaming down her cheeks. When Tim arrived at the office, he maintained a reserved demeanor. After exchanging brief pleasantries with his secretary, he retreated into his office and shut the door, beginning to pack his belongings. His concentration was broken when Jake barged into the room. What's going on? Jake inquired. Tim retrieved 2 envelopes from his briefcase and handed them over. One contains the signed contract from California, and the other is my resignation letter, Tim explained. I'm leaving immediately. I expect compensation for securing the California account and my final paycheck, including unused vacation time. Resignation? Why? Jake exclaimed in surprise. You can't leave, I need you. Do you honestly not know why? Tim responded incredulously. I've become aware of certain issues and have decided I can no longer continue working here. I've accepted a position elsewhere. I'll be out of your way shortly and will be heading to HR. Tim, let's discuss this, please, Jake pleaded. Tim shook his head firmly. There's nothing to discuss, Jake, Tim asserted. I'm done. You were a friend, but you betrayed me and wrecked my marriage. Find someone else to manipulate. So that's what this is about, Jake retorted. Your wife was more than willing, Tim. It doesn't have to ruin your career. Let Candy have her fun, and things will return to normal. You're despicable, Tim spat. I won't tolerate this. How long has this been going on? It started at the campout, Jake confessed. She came on to me while you were away, and things escalated from there. Tim was taken aback. Candy had never mentioned any infidelity, and he struggled to process Jake's revelations. You wanted me out of the way to sleep with my wife, Tim realized. Jake smirked in acknowledgement. And hiring her as a waitress was just another ploy to get her into bed, right? Tim pressed further. Exactly, Jake admitted. Tim swiftly stopped the audio recording he had initiated upon Jake's entrance. Thank you for your confession, Tim stated. I'm done here. Goodbye, Jake. Wait, Jake interjected, picking up a photo of Candy from Tim's desk. I'm sorry, Candy, but your actions have consequences, Tim replied sternly. I've seen the evidence, I've heard the truth, and I won't tolerate being deceived any longer. This marriage is over. Candy's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the situation. She pleaded, Tim, please, I made a mistake, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I love you, I don't want to lose you. I appreciate your words, Candy, but actions speak louder, Tim said, his voice filled with disappointment. I've made my decision. Now, I need you to pack your things and leave. I'll be staying here until the divorce is finalized. Candy's tears continued to flow as she processed the reality of the situation. Where will I go? She asked, her voice trembling. That's not my concern, Tim replied coldly. You'll figure it out. Just know that I won't be here when you return. With a heavy heart, Candy gathered her belongings and left the house, feeling the weight of her mistakes bearing down on her. As she drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling of regret and sorrow for what she had lost. Meanwhile, Tim remained in the empty house, grappling with the betrayal that had shattered his marriage and his trust. This isn't about contraception, Candy, Tim said with a sigh. It's about trust, respect, and the sanctity of our marriage. You've shattered all of that. Candy hung her head in shame, tears still streaming down her face. I know, Tim, she whispered. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Tim softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. I'm sorry too, Candy, he said. But it's too late for apologies now. I need you to leave. Feeling defeated, Candy nodded silently and began to gather her belongings. Tim watched her in silence, the weight of their shattered marriage heavy on his heart. As Candy left the house, Tim couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss and betrayal. He knew that their relationship would never be the same again. You've been served, the deputy said, handing her a stack of papers. Candy took them with trembling hands, her heart sinking as she realized the divorce proceedings were officially underway. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The deputy nodded and left, leaving Candy standing in the doorway, the weight of her actions crashing down on her with full force. As she closed the door, she turned to face Tim, tears streaming down her face. This is really happening, isn't it? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, it is, Tim said, his tone somber. I'm sorry it had to come to this, Candy. I truly am. Candy nodded, unable to speak as the reality of the situation sank in. She knew there was no going back now. Their marriage was over, destroyed by her own reckless actions. With a heavy heart, she turned and made her way back to her car, the weight of her belongings feeling heavier than ever before. As she drove away, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever be able to forgive herself for what she had done. Do you have any identification? He asked. She retrieved her driver's license and presented it to him. After scrutinizing it, he returned the license and handed her an envelope. You've been served, ma'am, he announced. There's also a restraining order requiring you to vacate the premises immediately. You can sign the divorce papers now if you wish. She nodded and produced the divorce documents. After a brief review, she requested a pen and signed the papers. "I'll deliver this back to the attorney," he informed her. "You'll need to leave now. If you attempt to return, you'll be arrested and put in jail. Do you understand?" "Yes," she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. She glanced back at Tim. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Yeah, me too," Tim responded. "Goodbye." "Goodbye," she uttered quietly as she departed. The deputy nodded at Tim before making his exit. The following days were tumultuous for Tim. Candy never attempted to contact him, but Jake called the house phone twice, leaving threatening messages. "God damn it, Tim, I know you're there," he yelled. "If you don't drop this lawsuit, I'm going to come and kick your ass." Tim smiled, recorded the voicemail, and forwarded it to Ruby, who then informed the local sheriff's department. Candy's parents also called, inquiring about collecting more of her belongings. "Yeah, sure," Tim agreed. "Just make sure she's not with you. There's a restraining order on her." "Okay," George, Candy's father, sighed. When he and Candy's mother, Bernice, arrived, they gathered what Candy had left behind and seized the opportunity to persuade Tim to reconsider the divorce. "Tim, she made a mistake," Bernice pleaded. "Surely you can get past what she did and take her back. She's crazy about you." "What did she tell you, Bernice?" Tim inquired. "She said she screwed up with your boss," Bernice admitted. "And that's it?" Tim questioned. "Well, yeah," she replied. "She didn't get into any specifics, and we didn't press it." Tim retrieved the envelope with the pictures and DVDs, revealing the shocking truth to Bernice and George. "I'm sorry she didn't tell you the whole truth," Tim said. "As you can see, it was a lot worse than she let on." "Oh my God," Bernice gasped. "I had no idea it was this bad." "I'm so sorry, Tim. I don't blame you for what you did." George's face reddened with anger. "I'm going to have a long talk with that stupid daughter of ours," he declared. "Have you done anything else with these photos?" Tim shook his head. "Not yet, but I warned her not to fight the divorce," he said. They sympathized with him for a while, then finished packing up the rest of her things. Half an hour later, they left the apartment, giving Tim a heartfelt hug and best wishes. Later that day, as Tim sat watching television, there was another knock on the door. He peered through the peephole and spotted Jake, Mike, and two of Tim's former work colleagues. He rushed into his office, retrieved his pistol from the gun case, and dialed 911. Holding the gun behind his back, he barely managed to open the door before they barged in. "We're going to kick your rear end," Jake growled. Tim brandished his pistol, causing them to hesitate. "You wouldn't actually shoot us," Jake challenged. "You're not capable." "Do you really want to test that?" Tim retorted. "Just so you know, I've already dialed 911, and the police are on their way. If you're here when they arrive, you'll be arrested for violating the restraining order." Jake, I think he means business," one of the other men interjected. Jake glanced at him momentarily before refocusing on Tim. Just then, they heard a nearby siren and saw flashing red and blue lights. "He's serious, Jake," Tim affirmed. They turned to leave, but two imposing uniformed officers were at the door. Tim lowered his pistol. "Put the weapon down, sir," one of the officers instructed. Tim complied, placing the pistol on the kitchen counter. "Sir, these individuals are breaching a restraining order," Tim informed the officers. "They forcibly entered my apartment and made threats against me. I want them arrested." "Do you have a copy of the order?" the other officer inquired. Tim nodded. "I do, officer," Tim confirmed. He retrieved an envelope from the kitchen counter and handed it to the officer, who scrutinized the order. After a brief examination, he returned it to Tim and addressed the four men. "Turn around, hands behind your backs," the officer commanded. The men glared at Tim as the officers handcuffed them and recited their rights. Once restrained, one of the officers addressed Tim. "Do you possess a license for that firearm?" he asked. "Yes, I do," Tim affirmed. "Would you like to see it?" He retrieved his wallet and presented the officer with his license card and NRA firearms training card. After inspecting the cards, the officer nodded. "Very well," he acknowledged. "Exercise caution with that weapon, understand?" "Understood, officer," Tim acknowledged. "Thank you." The following 3 months passed in a whirlwind for Tim. He found fulfillment working at Empire, far more than during his time with Jake. Weekly counseling sessions with Rose aided in addressing his trust and anger issues. Simultaneously, he enrolled in a gym, attending workouts thrice weekly. Additionally, he began martial arts classes, primarily for mental discipline. Furthermore, he pursued a diet and exercise course recommended by Rose. The divorce proceedings progressed smoothly, particularly as Candy didn't contest them. However, the alienation of affection lawsuits took a different turn. Ruby cautioned that they might be dismissed, and indeed, 2 of them were. However, the outcome of the case against Jake astonished both Tim and Ruby. After considering testimonies, evidence presented by Ruby, and Jake's financial disclosures, the judge ruled in Tim's favor, ordering Jake to pay $1 million in restitution. The judge had no kind words for Jake at the conclusion of the trial. "Mr. Hudson, your conduct in this matter is utterly reprehensible," declared the judge sternly. "Not only did you exploit a man who regarded you as a friend, but you also abused your authority as his employer to intentionally dismantle his marriage and family. Furthermore, it's noted that you violated the restraining order against you multiple times. Therefore, I rule in favor of the plaintiff and order you to pay restitution in the amount of $1 million. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular," protested Jake's lawyer, rising to his feet. "Mr. Winthrop, this court finds Mr. Hudson's actions not only irregular, but utterly despicable." "The ruling stands," affirmed the judge firmly. "When is this restitution due?" inquired Winthrop. "Immediately," replied the judge firmly. "Unless, of course, your client prefers to spend some time in jail for contempt." "No, Your Honor, my client will comply as ordered," Winthrop stated, taking his seat. "Very well," acknowledged the judge. "And may God help you if this check bounces." Case closed. With a decisive bang of the gavel, the hearing concluded. Jake wrote a check and handed it to his attorney, who passed it to the bailiff. After the judge recorded the check, the bailiff handed it to Ruby, who, in turn, gave it to Tim. To Tim's surprise, the check cleared the bank, and he paid Ruby her share of the judgment. While employed at Empire, Tim was approached by several of Jake's clients. It appeared that news of the lawsuit had spread, and many businesses were hesitant to engage further with someone who deliberately sought to ruin another man's marriage. They viewed a person who would intentionally wreck a friend's marriage as untrustworthy. Given the circumstances, Tim speculated that Jake would likely be out of business within a year. During this period, Tim declined to pursue romantic relationships, despite advances from several colleagues. In his mind, he remained a married man until the final decree was issued. Once that occurred, he would consider pursuing a relationship, but not before. When the final decree finally arrived, he celebrated with friends from work, which included a lap dance from a well-endowed stripper. A couple of months after the final decree, Tim received a call from Candy's mother. "Tim, this is Bernice. Do you have a moment?" she asked. "Of course, Bernice," he replied. "What's the matter?" "It's Candy," Bernice disclosed. "She's tested positive for HIV." "I'm sorry to hear that, Bernice," Tim expressed sympathetically. "But to be frank, I'm not surprised. Besides, we're officially divorced now, so there's nothing I can do. She's not covered by my insurance, and I'm not responsible for her." "I understand," replied Bernice. "I was hoping you might find it in your heart to have a brief conversation with her." "Well, I suppose I could, though I'm not sure what good it will do," Tim mused. "Please, just come and speak with her for a few minutes," Bernice pleaded. Tim deliberated for a moment before agreeing. "All right," he conceded. "I'll come over for a short while." "Thank you so much," Bernice expressed her gratitude. Tim drove to Bernice and George's house, where he was taken aback by Candy's frail appearance. She approached him, but he gestured for her to stay back. Saddened, she sat down and invited him to join her on the couch. You're looking well, Tim, she greeted him. Better than I remember. How are things going for you? Things are going fine, Candy, he replied. New job, new friends, a fresh perspective on life. And you? Not well at all, she confessed. You know about my HIV status. That's what your mother mentioned, he acknowledged. I'm sorry to hear that, but to be honest, I'm not surprised. Do you have any idea when you contracted it? I believe it was during one of my encounters at Jake's, she disclosed. I engaged in unprotected sex with multiple partners that day. Does Jake know? Tim inquired. She shook her head. Not yet, she admitted. But I'll have to inform him so he can get tested. I doubt he'll take it lightly, Tim remarked. No, probably not, she agreed. Listen, Tim, I just wanted to apologize to you once more, and I was hoping you could find it in your heart to forgive me for what I've done. I now realize the devastation my actions have caused. I could have refused at any point, but I didn't. I was foolish and selfish, allowing my desires to override my better judgment. And now, I'm facing the consequences. I had the most wonderful husband and partner imaginable, and I threw it all away for the sake of lust. I know you may harbor resentment towards me, and you have every right to, but I don't want to depart this world without your forgiveness. Tim carefully considered her words. It was the first time she had taken ownership of her actions and acknowledged the harm they had inflicted on others. He could continue holding on to his animosity, but he recalled his therapy sessions with Rose. Clinging to bitterness wouldn't aid his healing process. With a nod, he responded. All right, Candy, he said. I forgive you. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sat in silence. He contemplated offering her comfort, but she waved him away. Thank you so much, Tim, she expressed amidst her tears. Your forgiveness means more to me than you can imagine. And listen, I want you to find a woman whom you can love and trust, marry her, and build a future together. As for me, I'm done. My story has come to an end, but you still have your whole life ahead of you, and you deserve happiness. Thank you, Tim replied. I'll remember that. And if you ever need someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out, all right? She nodded, wiping away her tears. I will, Tim, she promised. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me. I've missed you terribly these past few months. I've missed the woman I married, Tim said calmly. How are things with Jake and Mike, by the way? She shook her head. Not good, she said. He's become very abusive lately. Losing to you in court didn't sit well with him. And as you know, his business has taken a big hit. I've noticed, Tim acknowledged. Has he physically harmed you? Not yet, but he's been aggressive, she replied. Do you want me to be there when you tell him about your diagnosis? Tim offered. No, but thank you for asking, she replied. This is something I need to do on my own. Sometimes I think if I had just asked him to leave that first day at the camping trip, things would be different. That's a possibility, Tim agreed. But it's likely it would have happened eventually. He had been pursuing you for a while. I think you're right, she conceded. Listen, I'm feeling exhausted and I need to rest before I go back. Thank you for coming over. It means a lot to me. You're welcome, Candy, he said. And remember, feel free to reach out if you need to talk or anything, all right? She weakly nodded. I will, she said. Goodbye, Tim. Please think of me from time to time. There was a hint of finality in her tone, leaving Tim concerned about her well-being. I will, he promised. Just promise not to do anything reckless, okay? She managed a smile. I won't, she assured him. Tim stood up and headed towards the door. Before leaving, Bernice approached him and embraced him. Thank you, Tim, she said tearfully. Your visit means the world to her, and to me as well. You're welcome, Bernice, Tim said. Take care of her, all right? I will, Bernice promised. A couple of weeks later, Tim was having dinner and watching the news when a report caught his attention. The bodies of a local businessman, his son, and a woman believed to be his lover were discovered today in what appears to be a double murder-suicide, the anchor reported. Jacob Hudson, president and founder of Hudson Consulting, along with his son and an unidentified woman, were found dead from gunshot wounds. Police are investigating. Shocked, Tim immediately called Bernice. She answered in tears. "Bernice, what happened?" Tim inquired. "They just told us that Candy is dead," she sobbed. "It seems that Jake shot her, then his own son, and himself." "Oh my God," Tim whispered. "I saw the news report and I was afraid it might be her." "I'm so sorry." "It's her," Bernice confirmed. "Do the police have any idea why it happened?" Tim inquired. "They're not entirely sure," she replied. "But I suspect she disclosed her HIV diagnosis to Jake, and he couldn't handle it. Autopsies are being conducted on them as we speak." "I'm truly sorry, Bernice," Tim expressed. "Please know I never wished for this outcome." "I understand, Tim," she responded. "Candy made her own choices and faced the consequences. Nevertheless, losing an only child is devastating. I find solace in believing she's in a better place now." "If there's anything I can do, please don't hesitate to ask," Tim offered. "Thank you, Tim," Bernice said gratefully. Candy's memorial service took place 2 weeks later, and Tim took time off to support her parents. The autopsies revealed that both Jake and Mike were HIV positive, like Candy. According to the police investigation, Candy informed Jake about her diagnosis and suggested they get tested. Upon learning they were positive, Jake fatally shot Candy, then his son, and finally took his own life. Tim mourned Candy's death for a few days, reminiscing about the good times they shared. Then unexpectedly, Cynthia Stone, another colleague from his team, paid him a visit. "Hey there, cowboy," she greeted. "How about joining us for happy hour tonight? Looks like you could use some company." Tim hesitated briefly, almost declining her offer, but reconsidered. "Why not?" he decided. "I could use some good company." "Sure, count me in." "Great. Meet us at the hitching post after work, okay?" Cynthia suggested with a smile. "I'll be there," Tim agreed. "Thanks for the invitation." As Cynthia walked away, Tim contemplated the ongoing cycle of life. Suddenly, he heard a familiar female voice in his mind. "Go for it, big boy." "She's into you," the voice teased. Surprised, Tim looked around but saw no one. A brief chill ran down his spine. "No," he thought to himself. "That's impossible." Or is it? Write your opinion in the comments. Remember, you're writing a story too, and it's up to you whether it's a good one or not. Thanks for watching and have a great day.